Do you want to bring balance to all the wireless radiation fields in your life, including 5G? The OMNIA Radiation Balancer is a small sticker you can stick on any device. It changes the state of the field and creates a new resonance between the wireless radiation and your energy field. On the link below, you'll see all our testing results that show how the body responds excellently once you've made this change in your life. And here's a special offer for the Journey to Truth crowd. Just enter the word truth in caps at the checkout for your 10% discount. It's easy to bring balance back to your body with the OMNIA Radiation Balancer.
You guys are ready. I'm just going to go ahead and do an intro and we'll get started.
Yep.
Awesome.
All right. Hey guys, welcome back. Before we get started this week, you guys may have noticed online we officially announced our conference and tickets are on sale. And Johan and Jodi, who you see now, are going to be speaking there along with many others. The information for all that is below secretspaceconference.info. That's not until May of next year, but get your tickets early because it's going to be a lot of fun. We're super excited about it. Great lineup. And we really wanted to build a case for this secret space program, the reality of it. So we got whistleblowers, physicists, ex-military, hypnotherapists, all the above. And we're going to just try and build a case for the secret space program for the people who may not be aware of it. And just to keep the information going. Anyway, tonight we're joined by Johan and Jodi, and I don't even really know the full story on how you guys found each other. If you guys don't know, Johan is a SSP whistleblower and Jodi herself is as well. So we're going to find out from them how they found each other. And then they have some shared memories from being in the programs together and then individual memories, obviously. So welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me back.
So nice to be here. Total fan.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So just for the people who don't know, let us know how you guys found each other and how this all started and how you guys ended up doing what you're doing now.
Let me start first.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so for me, the way this started, ironically, was in 2019. For those of you that remember the Quantum Red Pill Cafe videos that were out and about on the internet, on the intertube,
I do.
YouTube. It was interesting because Ted Alexander, the guy that was hosting that show, he had me on a bunch on that show. And he made a comment to me during one of the videos. He said, "Have you ever found your divine counterpart? Because all of us were twin in the programs. Have you ever found that person?" And I'm thinking, what in the hell is Ted talking about? And what happened at one point, I knew that I still have quite a few memories that were still kind of suppressed or blank slated out. And I had been working with my guides and other stuff to kind of bring that stuff to the surface. And what ended up happening is as I was doing that, I had one particular memory that kept showing up as a dream. I thought it was a dream, but it was actually a recall of this individual. I was actually on a mission. You guys have ever watched my videos. I've talked about 70 Vergis B, the massacre that was.
Yeah.
That particular conflict, we both served in that battle. Jodi was actually a part of my combat detachment, and it was on the surface. That we're actually in by the ring, trying to defend the ring area. And at one point, I got wounded, and Jodi actually took me to this medical site we had. And the part of the memory I recall vividly was laying on this table with this wound on this side of my chest, on my left side, I guess, and her yelling at the doctor, either you fix his shit now or I'm going to cap you and find someone who can. And she doesn't use explicatives at all, by the way, in the here and now. But over there, she did. And
Nice.
in the memory, I went to get out of the bed, like I went to roll like off the bed, like off the med bed. And here and now, I literally almost head planted into my nightstand. That's how vivid the actual memory was. So I actually thought I was there. So the motor control kicked in, and I started to come out of the bed, and I literally head planted into my nightstand and hit the floor. Wow. And it was like 2 days later when I finally figured out what was going on. I asked Ted, I'm like, dude, what the, And he's like, well, you may have just found your divine counterpart, whoever that person is. I scoured that particular memory for probably almost a month, maybe 2 months. And the only piece that I remember vividly was the voice. So fast forward to, 2020, I think, when you and I started chatting.
Yeah.
So Jodi has her own channel called Guided, Helping You Navigate Your Divine Journey. And I had heard about the show, and she actually was trying to get me to come on the show. And I started listening to some of the material, like the intros and stuff. And when I heard her voice, I'm like, oh shit, this is the same person. like dead nuts on same person. And next thing I know, we did a sort of interview, right? Not really like a taped interview, but just her and I chatting.
Like a Zoom chit chat. Like, right. So we would talk about this, and what do you think about this?
Nice.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, all of a sudden we're like, we need to have a different sort of discussion. And that's where we actually started discussing recalls, memories. And we were sort of finishing each other's sentences like, oh yeah, I remember this part of boom, 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 boom. And she was remembering parts of it that I didn't remember. And I remember parts she didn't remember, but they both intertwined together.
Oh, wow.
It felt like a puzzle piece. And this is the reason why in the program specifically, they get real twitchy when people have divine counterparts, because people that are twinned, they have the ability to unlock the other person. They're the key to that lock, memory-wise. And that's why it becomes kind of a big deal. When you have someone who is like that, the minute that person can unlock that key, all of a sudden both people start having all these different recalls, memories coming up. Because what happens is with most of the program material, what they try to control is the limbic system. And the limbic system has to do with your emotions and your memory, your amygdala and other parts of the brain. And that technology, that femtotech, is designed to essentially interrupt that stuff so you can't pull it up. And because you have someone who you have direct memories with, you hear the voice, you for example, you know the smell, you know the voice, you know the texture, the way the person feels. All of a sudden, it brings up all that stuff. And there's no way for that femtotech to override all of it. So, yeah, and that's the way it started for me. And there were a set of recalls that we had, probably 4 or 5 that was like right off the bat.
Oh, yeah. Like he said, it's like a lock and a key. So it's like when you unite together, it's just like this flood. It's like fire hose. Whoa. And so there's a lot that comes with that, though. Yeah. So, but on my end of it, so I saw, his interviews, but even prior to that, I had seen Anthony Zender's interview.
Who we're both friends with.
Right. And he was on, whose show was that?
He was on
Project Camelot.
Yeah,
actually,
Carrie
Cassidy's show. And I was like, wait, what is going on? And what did he experience? And I was just like, I've had some of those same experiences. Mm-hmm. So I reached out to him because I also wanted him on my show. And I'm like, okay, I am not going to say I was in the programs. I don't even want to admit to that. I feel like I would crazy town. Like that's what. But then he's like, okay, with what you're talking about though, Jodi, like just kind of open your mind and heart to it. The fact that you could be. Yeah. And I like, whoa. So I had to kind of like emotionally, spiritually, all that metabolize that, and kind of sit with that for a while, because that was just wild to me. So, Anthony and I were in conversation about a lot of this stuff. And so he kind of like opened that floodgate for me. And then all of these recalls started coming in. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And it just was so palpable for me. And then I started recalling the fact that, back 10 years prior, when I was having this regression session, this facilitator was saying, now, wait a second, you're telling me that you see this woman and she's in Paris, and she's like, the way I was describing it, she's like, I've never had this with a client, but you're describing a parallel life right now. And she's like, does she have a name? I said, yes, it's Victoria. And later, so fast forward, and I was like, oh my gosh, now I know what that was. That was a program recall. I was like delivering documents in Paris later on. So Johan and I figured out that it was a mission that we had done together. As
one of my other alters. And that's the thing. I actually was physically describing her in the outfit she's in and what she's carrying and why she's carrying it.
He filled in the puzzle pieces for me in a lot of ways. So I would start saying something and he'd be like, oh yeah, and you were doing this, and I'm like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, amazing. I fast forward, I saw him on Quantum Red Pill Cafe. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I know this person. I know his voice. Like, why does he seem so familiar? Like, this is crazy. So I went out on a limb and I'm like, I want him on my show as well. So the crazy thing is all these recalls started coming. And one of them happened to be where I was in this line of soldiers, basically. We were all in black and he was an officer. And I remember we were in line to get these shots in our arm, and it was like to upgrade. And I remember I didn't want to have it though, for whatever, I think it was like, I was afraid that spiritually it was going to do something to me that I didn't want to have happen. I just remember in the recall. So I remember looking at him mm-hmm. and like telepathically, like looking at his eyes and just saying like, don't make me do this. Like, and so for some reason there was like this resonance, and in that recall, he's like, okay. And he grabs my arm and he's like, just come with me and act like you're in trouble, basically. And so we like bypass the other guards, the other like commanders. And he puts me in this like holding room and he's like, just stay there. And so he tells, the other officers like, no, I took care of her. Don't worry. And so that was like the first, recall. And then the one that Johan's talking about, where we in that battle together, I totally let that doctor have it. What's crazy about that though, is I always remember I'm always on his left side. And what's weird about that is then on the med bed, I was on his left side. Like I actually went onto the med bed and laid there for a while because I was like freaking out that I was going to lose him. So there's just like all these things that happen. So in real time, 3D time, I reached out to him. I told him about some of these recalls. I said, this guy's going to think I'm totally crazy. And I'm like, but hey, I put that out there. We'll see what happens. Yep. And I didn't hear back from him for like 2 weeks. I'm like, oh my gosh, he thinks I'm crazy. So I like reached out again.
Understand the level of emails that Ted and I were getting. I mean, we were probably getting close to 1,000 emails a week from those videos. Wow. We're talking an insane amount of emails coming in. And I'm trying to filter through all this stuff. And you guys know how this is. And you get emails to your guys' show, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You get some emails, you're like, okay, this person's real deal. This person, what the hell are they smoking? And what is this email about? I can't even read whatever language that is. So it's like you go through, you filter all this stuff out, and you're finally like, okay, so what do I do with this email? And there were like 4 or 5 emails I sat on for a long time because I didn't know what to do with them. And
so I reached out again and I'm like, just wanted to follow up. Did you get that email? Like, just tell me yes or no, or hey, if you think I'm crazy, Ted, just, whatever.
Ted's the one that's kind of pushing me. He's the one that kept kind of pushing me about this. He's like, dude, maybe you should check this out and see if maybe you triggered somebody. And the minute he said that, I'm like, oh man. So, and that's the thing that people also don't understand about a lot of these disclosure videos that we do. We inadvertently will wake people up regardless of what they want to be awake or not, whether they want it or not.
Yeah.
I've seen it happen multiple times.
I mean, that's how it happened for almost all of us. We're not asking for this stuff. Something you see activates something in you, and
Yep.
And then there you go. You're not going back to the old way. And so before we get any further, there's something that I know you've talked about when we had a Q&A roundtable, Johan, before, and talked about, the divine counterparts, but you talked about how they put you people together as children.
Yes.
So that you create a bond. And then when you eventually reconnect, I don't know, in this lifetime or even in the programs, there's that knowingness there.
Yes.
Is that the case for you guys?
Yeah. And what happened, and the thing is, a lot of these memories showed up for us later on as we started doing more of the internal work, the self work, trying to get ourselves kind of healed, I guess you could say. One of the first memories I had of that, and my poor wife, she thought I was actually having some sort of epileptic seizure the night I had this particular recall. And I've talked about this recall with Misha Johnson and some others, and they kind of confirmed the baseline facts of what was going on. But the story basically goes that in that particular memory, it first showed up, and this is something else people have to understand. Many of the recalls you're going to have a screen memory first. Do not listen to the screen memories. You have to get past that.
Yes, I want to talk about that also. That was one of my questions, but continue and then we'll get into that.
So my screen memory for this particular recall was these three clowns walking up. For some reason, I've never been scared of clowns ever. But in this particular video, I'm watching these three clowns and I'm just scared to death of them. I'm like, what the hell's going on? Why am I scared of clowns for? The very first time that Johan ever showed up in my head where I could actively hear him, he said, do you want to know the truth of what happened to us? And I said, well, yeah. The next night I had that dream again. And this time I started shaking because he was letting me experience being electrocuted inside of a cage. I see his hand kind of come across the memory. And instead of it being clowns now it's three Dracos standing there talking to a bunch of scientists in white suits.
Wow. Okay.
And at that point, I'm like, oh shit. And I'm like a little kid. I'm like 6 years old in this memory, right?
Oh, wow.
And as I'm standing there, they had groups of 20 kids, and each 20 had basically 10 pairs in it, 10 command pairs, they called them. And this is where they intertwine you, they train you. So some of our first memories as kids was I had another female that they had tried to pair me with, and she absolutely was not into it at all. And then they bring in Jodi, and Jodi's at this point 4, I'm 6. Okay.
And all the powers that be were like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
These pairs are not working. They're not resonating with each other. And
what they did was they actually tried with us specifically. They tried having us play with toys first to see how in sync they could get us as kids. Mm-hmm. And with Jodi and I, what happened, the memory that I told her about was this truck. And she actually finished the memory, which is really weird too. But we were playing with these trucks, and she would literally drive her truck to wherever my truck was going. She knew instinctively, like psychically, where my hand was going to go with the truck and how we were going to play with the truck and what we were going to do with the truck.
So like anticipation and telepathy.
Yeah. Precognition, a bunch of stuff.
It's so crazy. So it's the twinning, effect and what they do, the pairing, the twinning effect.
They give you an injection, by the way, as they do this to amplify your psychic skills. And as that injection takes hold, what they're hoping is that it embeds a certain level of that trauma bonding with the person you're trying to bond with, right? That's how twinning really works. It's a mixture of chemicals and the actual bonding process. In our particular process, they were screening kids to find out how to get them into these command pairs. And the memory I was telling you about where I was being shocked, the whole cage was being electrocuted because we had failed a bunch of tests. And at that point, these three Draco walk, and one's a white royal. He's talking to this guy, Dr. White, I always talk about, right?
Well,
Dr. West, sorry, yeah, Dr. West. He's talking to Dr. West, and basically he's asking Dr. West, why is this cage continually failing? Now, what I remember is looking up in the cage, there's a little number identifier in the very top corner of the cage that says 16. So now I knew my cage number. So he keeps saying there's this redhead girl that kept failing. She kept failing the tests.
Because there's what, like probably 20 in the cage?
Yeah.
20 kids about.
The Draco tells one of the soldiers to pull this redhead girl out of the cage. They pull her out and she's staying right in front of me. And we're all wearing these weird, like, white, like, undergarments, but they're actually like our suits. And this Draco takes a finger and basically splits her from pelvic area to the top of her forehead. I remember the blood hitting me in the face, and I just freaked out. I freaked out as a kid.
Of course.
And I remember I'm sitting there, and hopefully you guys can still hear me. Okay, yeah.
We can.
Good. I remember the blood hitting me in the face, and at that point, as the cage is being electrocuted, she's trying to wake me up.
All of a sudden, in the bed, like he just starts shaking, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, what's happening? Is he having a seizure?" Like, I was just like freaking out. Yeah. And so I'm like, babe, are you okay? Oh my gosh, wake up. And he was not waking up. That's what freaks me out. Like, so I sat up in the bed and I'm just like, you need to wake up. You need to wake up. It was almost like this soul to soul communication too. I'm like, you need to wake up.
Yeah.
And then I like turn on the light real quick and finally he wakes up. And then he was just like, what is going on? and basically that shaking was in the recall, and what he was seeing and going through was he was being electrocuted. The cage was being like, he was being shocked.
So that's the very first shared memory we had. And I actually described the girl who I was paired with in this memory. She shows me a 4-year-old picture of her. I described her to the T.
Really?
Everything about her to the T.
Yeah, and in that picture, I'm holding my sister's hand, who's like, she's like 10 months younger than me. But and Johan's like, that's the way you would hold my hand.
Really?
Yeah,
wow.
It's crazy.
So this was a recent memory then.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we've had a bunch of stuff that got triggered off this way, like memories and recalls and stuff, because we're both trying to do the internal work to help each other to get some healing and to get some closure, but also to make sure that we're trying to gain full access to what really happened to us out there or up there, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that people don't really want to do, in my opinion. They want to talk about the trauma they've been through, but they don't want to talk about how they get through it and actually get healed from processing it.
Yeah.
Right?
And kind of like QHHT, quantum healing hypnosis therapy, as you have these recalls though from the programs, you can actually figure out how that can help you here in this realm. Right. So like, for instance, Johan had a recall just from last night. Was it last night? And basically it was the answer to the root of something that we're going through right now. Yeah. And it's like, oh, well, that completely makes sense.
Yes, 2 nights ago.
And okay, well, that's a big hint of how I can clear that, you know? So it's also just real quick to go kind of like rewind as far as like when I reached out to him and told him about the recalls. He sat on the email for like 2.5 weeks, almost 3 weeks, finally got back to me. And he's like, okay, let's have a Zoom call. So we have this Zoom call, and no joke, like I felt like he was staring at me, so evaluating me. Like
I thought I was seeing a ghost. I really did.
And it was like, I don't get unnerved very easily because, I've been a TV personality. I've interviewed so many people, from presidential hopefuls to, just a lot of people. And so because it was so unnerving, I mean, his stare was just like, just so like, like I literally dropped something so I could like, have divert my attention, because I was like, what is he seeing? Like, what is going on?
That's only happened with me twice.
Really?
With her, it was the first time. And you guys, if you've watched my videos, you know this guy called Commander Naguma, right?
Yeah.
Well, I've actually met him in the here and now.
Interesting.
Really?
And it was interesting because the very first time Peter, the insider, and I were chatting on one of our group calls, and this guy comes on the call, and Peter starts laughing. He's like, dude, you look like you just crapped your pants or saw a ghost. One of the two. And I'm like, I think I just did both.
Yeah.
Watching this guy, and I'm like, dude, you look like freaking Naguma minus the goatee and the Van Dyke, dude. And he's like, what? I'm like, and thing is, Peter's like, yeah, he's exactly right.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
Well, we all have those people that we see in life that we just recognize, like there's that soul recognition. It's really weird. We just don't know how we know them.
right.
But prior to all this information coming out about the programs and stuff, people didn't have a reference point. So you just kind of never figured it out, but you just knew that there was that recognition.
Right.
Now that this information is coming forward, people can actually start connecting the dots, and to where before we really didn't have availability to this information. So it's interesting.
Yeah. So when you look at the twinning process again, right, what you'll find is there's always what we call corrupted versions of that stuff out in the universe.
Yeah.
So you got a twinning process, which we know it's real. It does work. It's happening on a soul level. But the corrupted version of that would be like what you hear when people talk about soulmates.
I'm so glad you read my mind.
Or right. If you hear this thing about what they call twin flames,
Mm-hmm.
all those things are corrupted versions of that twinning process, that twinned soul process.
Mm-hmm. In fact, I was just going to bring up, because I've had Allison Coe on my show. You've had her several times on your show. She actually did a session with me. And at the time I was dating somebody who I thought was my divine counterpart. And the thing is like, there could be like these false divine counterparts that you think, or your twin flames or your soulmates. But the thing is like, sure, you may need to go through that. You may need to have those experiences to help catapult you to those actual divine counterparts that are for you. So it's
to learn certain lessons and things,
right?
Karma and stuff like that.
Exactly. So it's really interesting, the journey taken.
It's also about fine tuning your gut level response too, because what I've noticed is people who tend to be looking for that particular level of connection, which in my opinion is about as intimate as you can get.
Yes.
And it brings up a lot of stuff that sometimes people don't want to deal with. I mean, for us specifically, I mean, yes, I'm lucky that I married the person who is my divine counterpart. But what happens is that if you're not doing the internal work, if you're not willing to do the internal work, it can wreak havoc on you once you know who that person is. And that's where you have to kind of play around with the idea of, okay, how do I handle this now that I know this piece of information, right? You may be married to someone right now, and the divine counterpart's married to somebody else, for example, or maybe they don't have your particular sexual preference or whatever. The idea is that you have to figure out on what level and in what manner you and that divine counterpart can work out that stuff. And that's where that interplay comes into play, is like, how do you figure out how you do that? Because as you meet this person, as you interact with them in the here and now, that's where you start gaining insight into yourself and start gaining healing for yourself.
So what you're saying is sometimes your divine counterpart may not be somebody that you can marry.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, it might not be. Maybe it's not meant to happen in this lifetime.
At the same time, so you could be with them in a different realm, even though, or in a parallel life.
Sure.
Of course, that could be challenging if you're not able to be with them in this way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the case for some people, because I know people who actually claim this, and who knows, but nothing's black or white when it comes down to it,
Right.
Yeah.
Were you going to say something, Aaron?
Yeah, I was just saying it doesn't have to be a romantic relationship. I've heard people use the twin flame term, but describing what you just described and saying it could be your best friend, or it could be a parent, or it could be your child, or something. It could be any relationship. It doesn't have to be a romantic necessarily. So that lines up.
But what ends up happening in each of those dynamics, the question you're being asked is how can this other person help you on a soul level? How can this person help you do your healing? Right.
In my
respect, I have my wife, the person who I am closest to, most intimate with, my best friend, my partner, my lover, all that stuff. And what ends up happening is that in that particular respect, it causes both of us, it brings up all of our insecurities every thinking time. It brings up insecurities. And what that is the universe asking you, do you still really want this insecurity or not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's basically shining a light on areas where you're still doing the alchemy.
Right.
You're going through the refiner's fire to smooth out those rough edges. And it's beautiful transformation work. And the thing is just like, Johan said, it's like, are you really committed to this work?
Yeah.
Do you really want to do this?
And trust me, there are days where, so for the sake of transparency, we actually work with therapists. So, and we're doing that because we want to get the most out of this healing process. Mm-hmm. And we also want to be the best partner we can for our partner.
Yeah, exactly. And I was just going to say, not only together, but also individually,
right?
Because, there's stuff from family of origin that, creeps into your adult life and it might, seep into other areas. And you're like, wait a second, I thought I cleared that. What the heck, man?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So for example, like today, we had a subject come up with one of our therapists who he's freaking awesome, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Matt's freaking awesome. And when we were chatting with him, the subject came up about some of these insecurities, and he was drilling down on me in this particular conversation because he's saying, I'm really feeling for you right now because I really want you to get this idea about how freaking awesome you are. And I've had certain insecurities that have crept up because of some of this stuff that's happened with family of origin. And it was tough. It was tough to work through that, but we did work through that. And that's what happens as you do the healing process. You start realizing that the divine counterpart, in my case, my wife, they're actually there to help you. They're there to assist you. They're there to help you grow. They're there to help you emotionally stretch. They're there to help you get your head around who you really are on a soul level.
And we also want our clients to know in full transparency, like just because we're helping them along their spiritual journey, that doesn't mean like we're like the end all be all, like, right. We're like some guru. No, we're facilitating, helping them with their journey as well. And I always believe you are your own guru. You're your own authority. We can help facilitate, but we can also shed light on the things that we've gone through and we're still going through because, we're doing the work. We're still doing the work. I think forever we'll be doing work. And I hope everybody else will be doing work because it is a practice, literally, sometimes moment by moment.
So when you guys refer to family of origin, that's just a term I'm not really familiar with. So
family you grew up in.
Okay. I figured, but
it can be biological family, but a lot of times it's the family who raised you,
caretakers,
who gave you the behavior they gave you.
I got you. Okay.
Exactly. The people that were your caretakers helped form. There's this term imago, that
your image,
right? The image, or as we found out, there's also a Latin term which also means echo. So depending upon who those caretakers were, could have been your grandparents, it could have been your mom and dad, your biological mom and dad, who knows? But those individuals are the people that help shape you to become the person you are. And they're the people that actually are your family of origin. They're the people that created the image of how you view yourself and significant others in relationships.
And oftentimes they program us, whether they were in the actual programs or not. They help in programming us and giving us those limiting beliefs. And we have to kind of shatter those and be like, this is actually my divine self. This is actually what helps me align with the divine creator. Yeah. And I need to purge all those things that you programmed me with, or that the programs programmed me with. And I think, Johan was touching upon this earlier, and that is, we want to help people not only recognize and be aware that, they may have been in the programs, but also help with their healing. Because a lot of people tend to cycle through this trauma and stay in it. And just kind of like marinate in the fact like, oh, this was my experience in the programs and really just rehash rather than, okay, great, you were in that.
What does it teach you?
But what is it teaching you and how are you healing that so that those aspects, those altars, all of that can come home and you can reintegrate all of that?
Yeah, this is all extremely helpful stuff. I know probably not the information people were expecting to get out of this episode, but this is actually the most important. It's the most important stuff, because everyone watching this is going to relate on some level. We're all going through shit right now, and it's not easy. I mean, we're in the middle of a world war, literally, and it's not just the external events, but it's stuff that's going on individually with our relationships and our family and stuff. And people are struggling right now. And, you know, whenever it's not going well here at home and it's not going well out in the world, people are losing hope. So this is good information for people, I think. And thank you guys for doing what you do.
Yeah. And Tyler, to your point, you know, the external is a reflection of the internal. And the thing is it's this quantum echo that, you know, maybe in our parallel missions or, you know, other missions in certain programs, maybe certain people are still in their 20 and backs, or, you know, still being abducted or still being used. They're feeling those quantum echoes in this realm right now. And so that's where the healing really comes into play and really needs to be done.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. Yeah. Going back to your memories, there was a particular incident regarding a bus that you guys have shared before, and I found that fascinating. I caught one of your Facebook lives, and I was wondering if you guys could elaborate on that a little bit.
So
you kind of filled in the pieces for me.
Yeah, Jodi actually had the initial part of the memory, and one of my other alters, Victor, actually was telling me what the other part of the memory was. He's like, what she didn't see was these other pieces. Mm-hmm. So the way the story kind of breaks down, and we're actually still trying to figure out what the exact location is, by the way, because we looked on maps and stuff, and we believe it was probably, South America, probably in Venezuela, maybe near Cartagena, but we're not quite sure because some of the landmarks don't quite fit, but they do sort of. Mm-hmm. But essentially in that particular mission, it's weird because Kruger had essentially been tasked by a Russian group who worked for Vladimir Putin to essentially go down and assist with a government issue down in Venezuela. They were acting as emissaries basically for Gabriel Kruger. And we, Victor and Victoria, got tasked with going down there to deal with this mess. We call it the mess. And in this particular mission, part of the mess was they had an individual who was essentially acting as a political operative for a group against the local government there in Venezuela. And what had happened is that we were trying to find the gentleman on the bus. Her group, Jodi had 4 people, fire team on the bus looking for this individual, trying to locate him, trying to isolate him on the bus, i.e. try to take him out quietly. And Victor, who was a known sniper and a known assassin, was basically, he was waiting. He was given what they call a red line. In other words, if that bus makes it to this point, I'm taking the bus out regardless. We had talked this over in the mission briefings. Her people knew. And in her part of the memory, she got to the street right before the red line.
See, I didn't know any of this prior to him filling this in. The part of the recall I knew is that I was on the bus with my team. There were a lot of women and children on that bus. And all of a sudden I get this like psychic hit, like, okay,
Victor Hittner.
You've got to get these women and children off this bus, like now. And all I knew is that wasn't part of the plan. So I tell, the rest of my team, we got to get them off the bus now. And they're like, what? I'm like, no, we have to do it now. And they're like, okay, they trusted me. So like, okay, let's get them off. We get them off. And within like seconds, the bus blew up. And so then Johan tells me, well, this is why.
Yeah. Victor, basically, the guy who we were trying to hit was still on the bus. He was asleep on the bus, actually. And as the bus rolled forward and all the people got away from the bus, Victor took the shot and actually blew the bus up with a particular type of round called Herf round into the gas tank. And when it blew up, the Herf round basically brought the bus up and shattered the bus and killed the guy and the driver on the bus.
So when he tells me that, I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah. I get it now. Okay.
But so those were the first shared memories we had in terms of like what I'll call on Earth missions, I guess would be a good way to say it.
Terra mission,
yeah.
Missions here on Terra.
Mm-hmm. So just to help people understand and clarify, you're talking about alters, and people know you as Johan, and then now you're saying Victor. So how would this work in the programs? Is this another timeline? Explain this so people can understand.
This is where things are going to get a bit convoluted, so we have to be kind of careful the way we say this, right?
Okay.
When they put you through the trauma training as a kid in Ultra, what they do is they fracture the mind. And essentially, initially as a kid, usually when you're very young, like 2 to 3, you're going to get probably anywhere from 6 to 12, what they call splinters. Those splinters or fragments become strongs. And those strongs end up becoming the parts of the mind that stay even after everything else is subsumed back into the subconscious.
A good way to look at it is like genetic wise, you might think of something as like a dominant and a recessive.
Yeah. So
you have strongs, alters.
You also have submissive alters as well. Mm-hmm. Not in the term of like, okay, yes, and we'll say something. It's not a BDSM type submissive. Yeah. This is actually, the term submissive in this case refers to the fact that these particular alters they're not the type of alter that would go out and do something drastic.
They're more passive, I guess.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
They're passively trained, yes. And Victor and Johan were both strongs from me. So I am considered the oversoul, and they're both splinters or fragments from me.
Explain who Victor's like as far as the movie.
So Peter the Insider and I were chatting about this, and I asked him, I said, look, I've got all these weird like images of him doing like all this weird gun fu and stuff. And Peter's like, well, that makes complete sense, because the guy who came up with Hitman 47 essentially took information from a file that was based on Victor and put that into the game, because they thought this is just too unreal. And really? The fact is they're basically mimicking a Kruger asset as a hitman in the game. So
Hitman 47 is a game?
Yeah.
Also a movie.
It's also some movies
too.
Too.
I didn't even know.
Yeah.
So that is where some of the comments under these videos, people are like, this is all bullshit. This guy's just repeating a storyline from a movie.
Like, but, oh, this is from this game or this movie.
But they don't consider the fact that they got the idea for the game from something that actually happened in a black budget program.
And that somebody leaked it, like disclosure.
Yes.
On purpose, actually.
That's actually, so I had an individual, he tried this with me as well during one of our videos. And what he didn't realize is the movie that he said I was quoting came out 9 years after the actual picture was taken.
Oh, okay.
Really?
Thomas Costello Pictures came out 9 years prior to the movie that he was quoting in that particular video. And the movie themselves reused and what's the word I want to use? Re-encapsulated some of the pictures to use them in their video, the movie, to make a more dramatic scene, right?
Yeah.
And that being said, yes, this happens a lot. So what you'll see game designers, you'll see movie producers, movie executives, writers, screenwriters, actors, all kinds of people will be approached by these individuals who are in the programs. And what they do is they see these ideas into the unconscious mind of the collective. And they do this so that you're conditioned to believe when this stuff shows up, is it real? Is it not real? And oh, by the way, you've already seen this.
Yeah. Exactly. I'm reading a book right now called The Dulce Protocol. It's all about information on Dulce, New Mexico base. And there was a movie that was created, I forget what year. I don't even know the movie. I don't remember much of it. But either way, this guy like depicted these characters and all of this stuff that ended up, he didn't know that he was a part of the program. He thought it were his own imagination. And I forgot, like, other people later came forward with specific information, and he started flipping out because he was like, there's no way, like, I made this up. And then he realized after some recalls and stuff that he had actually been a part of the program, and it was
a good example of what we're talking about here. The Day After Roswell, right? That book. For those who have not read it, please go read it. This is an example of how the U.S. military did this in 1947 through 1956. They used the Office of Strategic Intelligence, the OTI, and the Office of Air Force Intelligence, I believe, to basically take this material from the Roswell crash. They put it into the hands of civilian labs and schools, by the way, and said, recreate this technology using what we have here. All of a sudden, we now have night vision, fiber optics, lasers, semiconductors, and all kinds of craziness.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I mean, like, we understand how this works, but the skeptics out there, they like to flip it. And that's why it's worth breaking down and actually analyzing the stuff, because like the video games, for one, like even Call of Duty, I think, and whatever game you've mentioned before that actually depicts Kruger and shows their logo. What game was that?
That is called Mirror's Edge.
Mirror's Edge.
Yeah.
Mirror's Edge Catalyst, yes.
Yeah. I mean,
so yeah, I mean, you've also got people that have studied this stuff in depth. One guy, Fritz Sprigmeyer, he wrote a book about this, how to create a program to Illuminati slave. Now he took it from a much more, what I would call a much more Christian stance, which is kind of weird to say that in terms of the programs, because any religion can be used as a cover or screen memory, and he's taking it from that stance, so it's kind of weird. The other guy that I was just there trying to think of what his name was. There's another gentleman too that also wrote a book about this as well, which I have to get back with you on that title. But these two books that came out, essentially, these guys went through the whole programming sequence. How does it happen? How do they do it? What does the trauma look like? What do the cycles look like? What do the constructs look like? Who can do it? Who can't do it? And of course, if you're people like us who've been in these programs, when we start reading this material, we start noticing like these weird little similarities that start showing up everywhere. Like, why does this one particular person always use these certain words? Or like in the interview that Jodi did, she had this guy from France call in. He started using some of the keywords on the three people on the call.
It was crazy.
Really?
Yeah. And those are activation words.
Yeah, they were activation words from that book.
Yep.
So did he know? Was he intentionally doing it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So so the producer just shut him down. Yeah. The host was like, no. We're going to have the producer shut it down. She knew exactly what he was trying to do as well.
Yeah.
So
really?
Very bizarre.
So, I mean, I'm actually impressed that she knew. I mean, that's not common knowledge, I guess.
We were all super soldiers.
Okay. So she was also.
He was aware.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So they're, I guess, buzzwords, for lack of a better term.
Pardon me.
And then you guys see these as like a red flag, or okay.
Yeah.
Well, when they're used in that combination, yes. It'd be one thing if we walked in and we said, blue bananas, right? Which is not a keyword at all. But let's say it is in the programs, for example, right? If I walked in and just said blue bananas out of nowhere, that would be one thing. But when I use that with 6 other words, which in this case, the guy used a continual set of 12 words, all programmed keywords, that's like mathematically beyond coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, this is so weird. So Johan was explaining this to me one night. We were coming back from a long drive, and all of a sudden, just hearing about this activated something in me, and I just started going off. I was like, blah, 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 blah. And like, you looked at me like, what? And so we wrote it down because I'm like, what does this mean? And we found out it was an activation code.
Yeah.
And it just was like,
codes.
it was just like a download. Like all of a sudden it just like came to me, and I was like, this is crazy.
Triggered a download and
And I'm like, why am I suddenly just getting this download of this code? So it was obviously embedded in me,
right? And
it just had resurfaced. So we figured out what it meant and all that. So it's crazy.
So going back to the screen memories, How, because there's right now in particular, you know, this, there are thousands of people coming forward with experiences and memories and whatever the case might be. And, you know, how do you distinguish between a screen memory, a real memory, what is an actual recall, what is not an actual recall? I know people are wanting to know this stuff, including myself.
So to split up the recall question first, a lot of times when you hear people talk about ego getting involved, you know, when you hear people paint themselves as like this Superman kind of character in the story, you can almost guarantee that's crap, because that's just not the way it works. You know, I've even had some memories that I've even questioned. And Ted and I have talked about this ad nauseum on the Quantum Red Pill videos. I had one that I really questioned. Like, I was like, this can't be real. And then one day, Peter and I were just chatting about it. And it was a mission we did in Syria. And Peter and I served in the same fire team. So that's how Peter the Insider and I know each other. And as we were chatting, he's like, we have to talk about this for a minute. And he starts like going through this whole rendition of what happened. And then he gets this part where this is the part of the memory I actually remembered. And he starts talking about it. And he goes, that was the coolest thing and the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my entire life all at the same time. And it was basically me creating this shield effect and stopping all these bolts from coming in. And Peter was like, dude, you should not have done that in front of the civvies. They saw you. And the fact is,
we talked about that on our show, I believe.
Yeah, you've brought this up before, but
that's a prime example where I didn't believe the memory at all. I thought it was complete and utter crap. And Peter's talking about it, and he said it the exact same way. And all of a sudden, it's like, okay, so he saw the same thing I saw, and that means it can't be crap.
Yeah.
The collaboration being one of them. If anybody else, you know, can fill in the blanks. And then you talked about like if you smell.
Okay, so this is on screen memories, right? So let's talk about this for a minute. The biggest indicator that I've found for screen memories where they tend to be false is when they're missing something, that a typical sense that you typically are very strong in. So for example, let's say, you touch something and you don't have any tactile senses coming back from your fingers, right? Or let's say you're in a dream and for some reason you can't smell anything. Or let's say that the visual stuff looks too almost like you're watching like a new remake of Star Trek or something. You know, they have all the chroma glares and the chroma bursts and all that. Again, not real.
That's off about it, basically.
Yeah, it's like the audio, for some reason you can't hear the audio, or the audio is really super muffled or changed, right?
Also, if there's the movie, if any of you have seen Bloodshot, there's a simulation in there where they're doing a simulation over and over and over again. Well, the main character, he thinks it's for real. And oftentimes they do this in the programs where they'll do simulations, but we think it's real. Now, what gives it away, though, that it's a simulation is on the table. What is it? A gun there. And then in the next one, there's not a gun.
Right.
But he goes to grab it and he's like,
wait a minute,
it's not there. So a way to kind of delineate between it being a simulation versus, you know, something real.
In that particular case, the muscle memory was stronger than his brain being wiped from the actual memory that they try to plug into his brain, meaning the screen.
So now a screen memory, essentially the way you're describing it, is more of like actually watching a screen, like a movie, and you don't have the senses. It's not tangible. And so that's a good indicator.
A lot of times when you're getting blank slated, they will put screen memories in place to block any sort of recall from ever happening. I had 3 different screen memories put into place. The lady who did my PHR sessions, Connie, when she was working with me, she had to pull those screen memories out. She had to basically delete them. And when she popped the last one, that's when all this other stuff started pouring out. And that's what happens a lot of times with people. They'll have that one memory that once they pull it out and they find it's false, all of a sudden they realize, well, okay, then that means this other stuff, well, what about it? Right. Mm-hmm. And usually there's some little piece of information in each of those memories that kind of links in the chain.
Yeah.
So screen memories for me also, they utilize like family members or friends. And when
or things you're familiar with, things that let's say that you have a particular phobia, they may use that phobia in the screen memory. That way you're scared of actually having the memory.
Yeah. So it'll block some piece of information that they don't want you to access. Or even like Johan was saying about the clowns. He's never been afraid of clowns, but all of a sudden he was afraid of clowns.
So an example of this, I knew of a gentleman who was having some beta programming issues, right? What we call beta programming problems. Mm-hmm. The actual screen memory that was blocking him from actually working through it he's scared to death of mice. And they were using this picture of a gray mouse in the memory. Every time he tried to pull up this piece of information, this gray mouse image showed up, and he would literally have go to a catatonic state for like a minute and a half. And this is how they do it. They find out what your fears are, and they use that to make sure that you can't get around it. So you basically have to go through it. And that's where working with someone who's a good therapist, or for example, we're getting our QHHT certifications. For somebody who does that sort of work, or let's say you're someone who's a hypnotherapist or someone who's a psychologist, psychiatric specialist, any of these people can help you do that work. But you have to have someone who's willing to help you go through the process of getting through it.
Mm-hmm. Or even go back to, like, for instance, I've had a traumatic incident in childhood, a couple of them where when I went back and actually looked deeper into them, I saw that there were actually Draco near, like, for instance, my mom. Right. Because I was like, why would my mom do this? And it wasn't actually her. It was like a Draco being that kind of almost like slipped and near her, into her.
Interestingly enough, again, this is where having your divine counterpart in place comes into play, because with us, Johan was the one who actually was talking to Victoria, her alter, saying this is what actually happened.
Yeah.
And when he activated that memory, all of a sudden she was like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So I guess the biggest thing is sometimes, if you have a QHHT session or something comes through, I wonder sometimes, and I know this is, we actually just covered this in the last episode as well, but how do you know sometimes it's not just your imagination? Like, how do you know you're not just making something up? Go ahead. It's just confusing to me because there's certain things that have come through on my end that if it's true, it's profound, but I stop myself all the time. Like I can't go and share this publicly because I don't actually know. And I'm like, did I make that up or was it real? Do I just have to trust myself with this information?
I think repetition too. Like I noticed that throughout life when I've had either repetitive dreams or repetitive feelings about it, or it keeps resurfacing somehow.
Yeah.
Whether it's either in a dream or an experience, or certain people come into your life and they start talking to you about that certain subject, you're like, oh my gosh, really again?
Or they'll use a phrase, a word, or a sentence that's in that particular thought pattern, that thought stream, and immediately brings that stuff right to the surface. And you're like, and I've actually,
like, you can't make that up.
I've literally said this to Jodi a few times where I'll say either A, you can't make this stuff up, or B, I'll be like, I'll literally look at the ceiling and be like, really? Because it's like spirit, universe, your divine creator, basically putting it right in your lap, saying
you can't ignore it.
You can't ignore this anymore.
And that's, I'm actually just like realizing this as we're talking, but there is a particular thing that it's not only has it come through, but I constantly think about it. And maybe that's a sign that it's possibly real. The fact that like it literally is like what I think about it, even when I'm not trying to think about it.
Yeah. Like, so I also do shamanic journeys for our clients as well when they have certain questions. One exercise I did when I was in training for, shamanic studies is they asked us to partner up, and they said, ask somebody a question where they've had a dream over and over again and find out what that is, Well, I actually looked into a dream that I kept having. Now, when I was little, I was probably, 5 or 6. I kept having this recurring dream that I was on this ship at sea, and there were these like pirates who kept saying, okay, you need to choose. It was like this shit full of people. you need to choose who gets killed or who walks the plank and then gets killed, right? And it was like these pirates had swords, and it was like I was mortified, right? So it would get down to finally like my own family, and then it would be like finally my parent. It was just so crazy. And so I'm like, something is to this. Well, I realized it was a screen memory because they didn't want me to access the actual information.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like there's really layers to this.
Sure.
And there's something real to it. So
yeah. I mean, I have a lot of people have that. I have that dream, that recurring dream from when I was around 5, you know, that it was the worst nightmare ever. And it would happen a lot. And that's the information that's coming through about what might have happened then. But that's for another time. It's just, I just don't want people to understand it. What is what, because I know everyone's having stuff come through right now. And yeah, so.
The reason why that's happening is that if you look at our planet, essentially we have 2 divergent timelines, and people are being asked to choose which one do you wish to be on. One timeline is the 3D timeline. One timeline is the 4D timeline. And these 2 timelines essentially, for all intents and purposes, it's essentially forcing humanity to determine, do you want to be in fear or ego, or do you want to be in love? Love being the 4D feeling, ego being 3D, right? Many of the powers that be that we've talked about in our videos, and you guys have talked about in your videos, those powers that be, they do not want us stepping into our 4D power. Because as we do, we start becoming more Christ-like. We start becoming more like our divine creator. And if we step into that power, we actually at some point can overtake the people who are trying to keep us down. Right?
Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
I've used this statement a lot when people say, well, how could you guys work with the Draco when you're doing these missions and stuff? And I keep using the phrase, well, prisoners work with the wardens and the jail keepers, don't they?
And it's not like we really had a choice.
Right.
You know?
Exactly.
But to Johan's point, though, you know, those things are resurfacing for you, for so many people, because we're trying to purge those things that don't serve us. We're trying to get back to our divinity, align with divine creator, so that we can ascend to those higher densities.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. And they know us better than we know ourselves, and they know our weaknesses. They know where we're vulnerable, and it might not be, it could just be a feeling that they give us. Like there could be entity attachments and stuff that actually will they almost disable you in a way, and they won't let you get into that heart space, or they'll always be tempting you with something that they know, a toxic habit that you used to have. They're tricky, and it could look like a number of things for each person. It's different. So it's just another aspect. Like be aware, like some things happening in your life right now might not, be necessarily you. It could be a force trying to stop you.
Yeah. We're smiling at each other. Yeah. We do etheric attachment removals for our clients. And we also, again, we just bring up the practice. Like sometimes it's moment by moment, and we have to ask ourselves, like, is this my energy, or is this something else? Is this an attachment, or is this somebody trying to get in my way, or is this me getting in my own way? So it's like,
or why am I having this thought,
Right.
Is this my thought? And sometimes it's not your thought. And then that's where you have to know your power and no, I do not consent. I know this isn't my thought. But we have to remember to do that. And as soon as we let our guard down, they're not dumb. They come right back, And
what you'll see a lot of times too, is that if they know that the etheric attachments aren't working, if they know that the entrainment, which is what you're talking about, that pattern where memories, thoughts, and feelings are being essentially pushed onto us by the entertainment business, the news business, whatever you want to call it, if that entrainment gets broken, that's when they activate the other programming portions. So for example, you may see, for example, beta programming show up, right? Once someone's got past that, all of a sudden they start wearing these weird leopard prints all the time, and they start using sexually provocative clothing, and they start acting in a certain way that, certain words might get thrown around in the room that's not appropriate. The reason why is because that beta programming is designed to do that. It's designed to lure people with the male or female wares, right? And this can happen on multiple levels. All these different programming layers can be activated by these individuals. I've said this before. We talked about Operation Slithering Snake at the MGM Hotel in Las Vegas, right? You guys remember when that went down, right? Well, that was an asset that went awry or was triggered by the CIA to do that particular job. There's no other reason why that happened the way it did. I've said this till I'm blue in the face, and I will stick to my guns on this one. It was an actual CIA hit job.
I have contacts with DoD, and I talked to them about this, and because I had a spiritual download about how that went down, and I discussed that with them, and they would just deny it because they're in on the misinformation, basically agenda.
They also don't want the culpability / liability of saying yes, we did that.
Yeah,
and you said you had you contacts in the DoD. Is that what you said? Okay,
right.
They're never going to admit.
Nope.
That,
and even when I said, look, I already know, we have bases on Mars. We have all this going on up there already. And they're like, what? Well, they're now coming out and saying that themselves. It's just like, you guys are just too much.
Yeah.
Too much.
Sometimes I wonder if the information is so compartmentalized that some of the people actually don't know. And they believe the information they're being handed,
That's true.
That's also the case.
Before he actually said this, right? When he first came out, he talked about the fact that you have groups who believe they're the dark tip of the spear, and they're not.
I think they're the top. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they see groups like NWR, what we call Nakwafen or Dark Fleet, and all of a sudden they get really pissed off because they realize they're not the dark tip of the spear. NWR is, right? That's where those kind of conversations come into play. And the fact is it's exactly what you said, Tyler, about the compartmentalized information, right? When you have people who've never served in those particular programs talking shit about them, it really makes me scratch my head because I'm kind of going, well, how did you know that when you said you've never been a part of that? Just saying.
Yeah.
So It makes you wonder why they're casting those comments out into the world, right? They know they have an audience and they're saying this stuff because they know they can get away with it.
Like, we know that there's a CIA asset who is totally in on the misinformation bandwagon. Yeah. And he has harassed us and so many others in the disclosure movement like nobody's business. And it's crazy because we see right through it. And, we've done research on it. Johan has researched the fact that he has a crazy record himself. And I mean, his credibility is just in the tank. But he's getting paid by somebody else to do that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's a bunch of those out there.
Yeah. It's too bad we can't share names.
I know. We have a few.
We that individual, I've done background research on this individual because I want to know who he was. I used to work as a private investigator, so I started digging up all this crap. And I want to find out, who is this individual? Who is he, and why is he being used the way he is? And the minute I found this information out, I'm like, okay, that kind of makes sense now.
Yeah. I think I have an idea. We'll save that for off camera. Right now, so all these programs, all these people coming forward, they're adults, they're older people, right, who have done their time, they're 20 and back, and they're now coming forward, whistleblowing, whatever the case is. We hear about this Earth liberation, these bases being cleared out, maybe potentially the moon and Mars being liberated. If that's the case, do you think these programs are still continuing? Do you think they're still recruiting children like this and bringing them into the programs under slave conditions? Or do you think it's not happening that much anymore because of the...
It's not. Ted and I have chatted about this. There was a directive given back when he and I were both in the programs actively. And originally they were abducting millions and millions of children a year. And we're down to like 1% of that now. So
good.
All the kids on the milk cartons in the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Exactly.
The reason why they tapered that down so far is because of what happened on Mars. They knew that if they were going to disclose these programs out to the public at some point, they had to move all these slave and cloning facilities off Mars because they knew at some point when NASA lands there and they find these facilities, they're gonna be like, yeah, what is this? Hey, Bob,
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that's where 70 Burgess B came into play. They moved all of that stuff out of system to 70 Burgess B because they wanted to make sure that they could still do these exchanges, but not inside the solar system anymore.
So it's not happening as much as.
However, there are still active missions, and there are people who are still doing work, and they're still abducted to do missions. I mean, we do a service called Secret Space Program Information Access. And so like Johan will utilize his alters to access information for them. Number one, to let them know if they were in the programs or not. Number two, some of them are still very active, some of their alters.
Yeah.
So.
Mm-hmm.
And just so we're clear, by the way, people ask, well, are your alters still currently being used in the programs? That question has came up to me numerous times. And I actually was questioning that up until about a week ago.
Oh, wow.
And what happened was we have Ring security cameras in our
oh yeah,
where we're currently staying.
This is crazy, guys.
This is
hold on to your seats.
This is like a story sort of thing, right? We actually had video of me stepping through the frame. Now, here's the thing, right? If you look in the bottom right-hand corner, it shows, the timestamp, the minutes and seconds, right? Mm-hmm. That continues to flow through the video the whole time.
The background's completely the same.
But what you see in the video is you see me stepping halfway through the frame and then I just disappear.
Really?
And the thing is, I don't remember walking through the frame.
He doesn't even remember what he was doing. Like, first of all, you see him just looking down. He looks like he's in a complete daze. And he's just like walking with his head down. He doesn't normally walk like that, by the way. He's just like walking with his head down. And all of a sudden he disappears, reappears. And it's like, wait, what?
Like seconds? Like seconds later?
Like barely even a second, right? Like a couple seconds?
I don't show back up in the video. And that's the thing.
Really?
So
it is nuts.
Where my memory came back was me sitting down in a chair.
Really?
Now, so this footage was recorded at what time? Overnight?
During the day.
It was during the day. Again, it was via a Ring security camera system recorded to their web servers, which is an Amazon cloud service.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a couple days before, or maybe even a day before, he was doing a particular mission. And he was also on a walk where a couple guys in white vans were actually kind of monitoring him. Then all of a sudden this happens on the Ring camera.
I thought the white van stuff was kind of weird because I thought this can't be what this is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then of course, literally like a day or two later, this video shows up where I'm like poofed. And I'm like, what the hell just happened? And the thing is, I didn't even see the video, by the way. I didn't even know the video existed until my sister walked in and she was freaked out looking at the video. She's
not one who even necessarily believes in the programs.
Right.
She just brought it to his attention. Really? What the F is this?
She literally walked in.
She was freaked out.
She was literally shaking, showing me the video. She looked at me, she goes, explain this to me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like she's like losing her shit. And she's like, explain this to me, please.
I wonder what would happen if I had like some sort of camera set up like while I sleep or whatever, because the experiences I've had and other things, in a way, I'm actually scared because I don't even know that I would want to see if something happened, and it also, I remember in Corey's original testimony, he tried setting up cameras and nothing happened.
He said the cameras always malfunction or the battery would die
or they just
wouldn't show up. If they set up a camera.
Exactly. So I wonder if you're better off not messing with it, but obviously yours is for a different reason. You're just a security system, not to capture something.
Right.
But that's super interesting. So then I guess that tells you that, you are still currently active.
Well, and the thing is I talked to Peter maybe 2 days after that. And Peter's like, oh, hey, by the way, I activated your asset to use them on this particular mission. And you may have some recalls from this, so don't worry about it.
Really?
That's so wild.
Like, I'm like, thanks, you think? And then I started having the recall from the mission maybe a day or two after that. And all of a sudden he calls me up and he's like, okay, we need to do a debriefing on this because I need to know what you remember. And I started telling him what I remembered, and he's like, oh, you remember that, do you? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, okay. He's like, apparently the blank slate doesn't work on you very well anymore. I'm like, nope.
This is why disclosure seems so impossible to the masses, because in order for somebody to comprehend any of this stuff who is totally unaware, there's denial. There's going to be denial. It's so fantastical sometimes that people won't comprehend it.
It's so far outside of the programming that we're all programmed with of what reality is, who
exactly
are everything. So it's almost like people have to be deprogrammed first, whether they do it themselves or, they get help. But
and that's what
there's all these walls up to this kind of information that, oh, this is ridiculous. This is crazy. This is impossible.
And that's exactly what happened to me.
None of this can possibly be true.
When I worked with Connie, that's exactly what happened to me. She literally had to deprogram me first mentally. Yeah. And then she had to go in and actually fix what was screwed up to a certain degree. And then she had to allow my brain, my subconscious, to actually allow this stuff to come back to the surface again.
What's that saying? When the student is ready, the teacher will come.
Right.
And so it's like, I feel like there's certain movies, there's certain documentary, there are things out there where there's not only soft disclosure, but then there's also hard disclosure. I mean, even that movie Tenet that was out recently and Bloodshot, I mean, those movies have some pretty hard disclosure in them. Yes. I mean, I had one of my recalls confirmed through watching the first part of Tenet. I was just like, wait, what? Wow. Okay. Back to building the gap.
I still have to see that movie.
Yeah. I just wrote those down.
It's good.
I just wrote those down because some of these movies I know for a fact,
Tenet, what you see with Tenet specifically is it's a mixture of ICC temporal operations and Kruger. And that's what you see being mixed in that movie. And ICC temporal ops, their job is to essentially monitor, maintain, and protect timelines.
So are you guys aware of the movie Tomorrow War that just recently came out? Have you seen that?
I haven't seen it.
I have seen it.
So do you think that does a pretty good job at depicting Aaron's froze. And there he is. Do you think that does a pretty good job at depicting like a 20 and back, but they do it in 7 days, right? Like they're taken out and they go 7 days and then they come back. To me, that's a form of disclosure, but they're only, instead of 20 years, they're gone for 7 days to do a mission. Right. Do you think that depicts it pretty well?
No mind wipes or anything.
So beyond the actual technology that takes them there, I mean, if you remove that technology for a minute, yes, that's technically the alters that are used in those programs, they're highly trained. They take kids when they're 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. And by the time they're 18, they've got, anywhere from, 12 to almost 18 years of programming. So, 16 years of programming, right? Mm-hmm. So they've got all this programming. Essentially, they're hardened soldiers by the time they're 18. And what they do is they wait until you're 21 to actually activate the asset and use it. Because legally, they're required by a soul level agreement and by a legal agreement to not do that before then. And what happens is that movie talks about this idea of who and how you can interface with people over there, right? Mm-hmm. The quantum echo portion of that is highly accurate because in that movie, you see that the protagonist, he actually talks to this she's a colonel, right? The colonel that he talks to ends up being his daughter.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the type of quantum entanglement stuff we see showing up here when we come back.
Yeah, and that part resonated with me because it kind of tripped me out, but it made sense because we listened to you guys all the time, all these meaning whistleblowers.
Mm.
And I was like, this is kind of exactly what I would imagine would happen. Had it been, if it were to happen. So anyway, I just think it's interesting because like there's tons, like the technology, like you said in that movie, that's like obviously ridiculous. Like they would never send anybody and just drop them out of the sky or whatever, but maybe they would.
Also with that movie, to me, because the temporal thing, because they realized, because they were like, we never ship disappeared one day, and then they realized their ship was buried under the ice in like Russia or something. So like basically they're 50 years back in time, and then they go take out the ship or take them out then, and that wins the war. So it's almost like they disclosed the temporal war that's, I believe, is currently happening as well.
Yeah.
Where
Aaron, you're breaking up.
There is, the war is temporal.
You're breaking up a little bit, Aaron.
Sorry.
Just FYI. But I think like we got what you're saying. It depicts like the temporal war, which is actually what's going on right now.
Yeah.
Which I'm actually curious. Yeah. I'm actually curious to know like what your guys' thoughts are on this like galactic war that's taking place right now. We hear all kinds of information coming through about, the Dracos are almost defeated and there's still a battle going on. They haven't been quite taken out yet. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
So basically, in August,
I was just going to bring that up, the treaty.
Yeah. In August, the treaty that we had with the Draco expired.
On the 2nd of August.
Was that the Desert Accord Treaty? Or no?
This was an actual accord that was struck between humans and the Draco in terms of use of Antarctica. Back with the Germans, the Antarctic Germans, right?
Okay.
NAZIs, right?
Is that why they're all fleeing Antarctica?
Of course, the video freezes up at that point, right? So,
well, hang on a sec. Let me slow you down, just because we're all freezing up here all of a sudden. So, Aaron asked, "Is that why all these nations were fleeing to Antarctica recently?"
Yes.
Okay.
The reason why that was happening was because when they uncovered the group that's down there, and again, CG talks about this in his video, and a lot of others have too. This group essentially was fleeing destruction when Maldek got destroyed, which is now our asteroid belt, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They came to Antarctica, they crash landed there, cannibalized their craft, and in turn started cannibalizing us as a species too, right? The secondary part of that is the part that's less talked about, and that's where you had these Draco who later followed on behind them, took over their facilities, took over the base, and at some point when Base 211, New Schwabenland, was formed by the Germans, they ran directly into the Draco. They were told by the Lyrans where to find these Draco, and that technology that they were given was actually tested there, as it was tested in Germany, and they eventually left from New Schwabenland, Base 211, to go to what's now the LOC. And this is where you have like your Third Reich in Germany, Fourth Reich in Antarctica, Fifth Reich at the moon. So,
and you're seeing quantum echoes here going on right now. I mean, with Ida, Hurricane Ida, all that. The destruction that is happening, the flooding, but then you also have stuff going on with, the Taliban and Afghanistan. So just all this chaos going on, it's going on multiple layers.
Yeah. So, okay. So yeah, a few things. Like I always wonder, like the stuff that happens in the Middle East, or is this all cover for like a space battle or?
Yes.
Like, I mean, I think in the past it's been pretty clear, but this time around, I wonder if it's the same thing. Like there's something going on there regardless, but they have to give it a false narrative. So they create all this activity right there in the same area. So it's not even like they're diverting your attention away. They're just creating an excuse for what's really happening.
A distraction.
A distraction. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then you say in August, this treaty or this accord or whatever ended.
It ended. So, it was not renewed.
So what does that mean for us moving forward then?
So, for example, let's look at New Schwabenland and let's look at base 211 and the LOC, right?
Yeah.
All these locations were essentially Draco controlled, Draco owned. Well, what happened is that you had Earth Alliance, so we need to talk about this for a minute. There's what's called Unified Alliance Command, UAC, right? The alliance essentially is split into two main factions. You have Earth and Space Alliance, right? Earth Alliance specifically focuses on Terra and on the moon, where Space Alliance focuses outside the asteroid belt primarily, out toward the Oort cloud. And Earth Alliance tends to focus inside the asteroid belt, primarily around Earth and the moon. Earth Alliance essentially was brought in, and they were used to eliminate many of the Draco that were down at this base. We're talking like over 2 million Draco plus that were at this base. Some did survive, some did escape, but it was essentially a wholesale massacre at the bases that were down there. The reason why this was done was because once that treaty ran out, Earth forces wanted to make sure that Draco could not get a foothold there, legally speaking. If we removed the occupants from there, we essentially evicted them from Earth, right, by force. And that's essentially what they tried to do. Now, what happened was these Draco flee to the LOC, and while they were there, that's when they started negotiating with the Terrans. And there's a lot of speculation as to what happened at the LOC. I haven't heard anything yet in terms of what happened, but I know what happened on Earth. I know there was a major strike. Earth Alliance brought in ships, they brought in teams, and they hit that area really hard. And they wiped out a large percentage of the Draco that were down there.
That's great news. And that lines up with what we've been hearing, and it makes sense. And we've even heard like some of the actual Nazis that were still there, the Germans. They're only referred to as German-speaking people, but they were leaving to Argentina, which would make sense because that's where we. Yeah. We know that's where they also once had a stronghold and bases. I don't know now. I don't know what's going on there now, but it's all good news, even though things look horrific right now on the surface and nobody knows what the hell's going on. It's confusing.
Imagine if you were members of this cabal, right? "Quote unquote" cabal.
Yeah.
Imagine if you were someone who is used to having all kinds of power because you aligned yourself with this particular ET species. And all of a sudden, this ET species is now not barking orders at you. Essentially, the dog has no master at this point.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's exactly what we see happening is these individuals. For example, look at Jeffrey Epstein, right? He's a prime example of what we're talking about. He was a handler for many of these high-profile people in Hollywood, in politics, in royalty. And because of who he was, it was speculated that he was part of this inside cabal group trying to keep the reins on these people by keeping leverage on them. And he was one of the people that they were trying to silence, because if he spoke about what he knew and who he was connected to and why, it would blow the lid off all of that stuff too soon.
Yeah.
People just grasping for the power that they have left.
Right.
So, this is not over. You have Earth Alliance that's going to be helping leaders, at least those who understand that this all needs to be cleaned up,
right,
and the leaders who are on the light side. And there is going to be a battle in the future from what I've journeyed and seen and what Will has channeled. Mm-hmm. So this isn't over, and we just need to hold on tight, do our inner work, and but Earth Alliance is going to help, and they're going to activate some assets.
Well, and that's the overall message from everyone right now. It's like, guys, it's not getting better right now. Not yet. There's some things that need to happen first. There's an order of operations before we can actually.
The light is winning, but it's not over.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. We do have a lot of help. We have a lot of support. However, yeah.
A lot of ET, benevolent ETs are helping as well.
Yep. Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. And then, people are like, one of the common questions is like, how much longer? It's like, holy cow. But I don't know if we're supposed to know how much longer exactly?
I mean, we have gotten certain things as far as when is full disclosure going to happen? When is that final battle going to happen with like Earth Alliance against Draco type reptilian, ET, malevolent ETs? We have gotten certain timelines that's malleable though, because decisions that people make have an impact on that.
Yeah. And we keep hearing like 2035 to 2055 is like the probable cleanup phase.
Yeah.
But again, that's subject to change, because as we make changes in our decision tree, that changes that timeline a lot. And Peter talked about this actually in one of his videos he did with James Rink, where he said, now that the egregiory has switched to mostly positive, or 50% positive, that was the sign that most of these benevolent ETs were watching for. They were waiting to see when that egregiory would flip. And once it flipped, that was the flag to say, okay, humans finally got it. Now we can go and we can assist them if they are actually requesting assistance from us.
It's like they tipped the scales, so to speak, with the egregiory.
Yeah. And part of that was done because of all the star seeds that were dumped in the planet that were born here. They already know where they're from. They already know what energy they resonate with. They already know where their home is. It's not Earth.
Yeah.
But they're more than willing to help Earth out. So they basically shifted that egregiory in such a way that people wanted to help other people, which made the egregiory more positive.
That's why the inner work is just so vital and important, because these decision trees that we're talking about and these branches that can actually really impact the certain timelines. It's just vital. This is the way I explain it to a lot of clients and friends, is that like, you know, a great psychic could tell you, okay, I foresee this, this, and this happening to you. But that's at that precise moment. I mean, an hour later, you could make a different decision and a whole decision tree could happen.
Bingo.
It's never set in stone. Yeah. Because depending on your choices in the present, it's always altering what will happen. Yeah.
Right.
And there's probable futures. And that's what, like, even Looking Glass and technology is like, yeah, they're seeing a probable future based on the trajectory of where you're at right now, but that can always change based on what happens or what decisions you make.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
and like we say, things change in the fog of war. I mean, literally by the minute, by the hour, things can change. You may have a plan and you might have to toss that plan because of something, because of a decision that's made. Actually, Johan, I think I remember you talking about one of your missions where, was it you maybe, that you made a decision that threw everything off? Was that you?
Yeah, I've had a few of those.
Yeah, like they had already looked at Looking Glass and saw how it was going to go, but then a decision was made that threw everything off, and then now it didn't play out that way because of that one decision.
Along those same lines, I just recently saw something that was so unique to me that I had never seen up until that point. And I was basically visiting with a girl who I knew was a starseed. And I saw that she had been in the programs. And I saw that just prior to her incarnating into this realm, there was a malevolent group after her, chasing her. And what she did is she went through a timeline portal. It's almost like she was a quantum leaper. She went through this timeline portal, but before she did, she scanned the timelines. She saw a woman who she knew was about to conceive. She hopped into that timeline. So she knew that mother was going to have the baby, her, and she got away from this malevolent group. And the thing is, what she didn't realize is that, okay, well, everything that she was trying to get away from there, she now has to take care of it here. So, like wherever you go, there you are. So it's not like all of a sudden, oh, clean slate, like voila, you get everything just brand new. No, you still have, these different incarnations where you still have to practice, you still have to clear, you're never running away from anything.
Yeah. Well, it's just like the couple that tries to save their relationship by having a child, or it's like moving to the beach because you think that's it's gonna change because you're living by the beach now and all your problems will melt away. No, they're all gonna
kinda. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Just kidding, Tyler.
Well, I mean, you might enjoy your evenings a little more, but yeah. But yeah,
I totally get your point. Yeah, absolutely.
It's like we have these soul lessons and experiences we have to go through, and you cannot, like you said, you can't escape it. It's just going to show up in a different form if you try to outrun it, and you're going to have to face it, at some point. And like what you don't, you repeat. What you don't repair. It's that whole thing. When you don't learn your lesson, it's going to keep showing up until you learn it.
So
until you go through it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm a living example of that. We all are, in some way, So guys, help people understand where they can find you, and what you guys actually do, your service, all that stuff.
So you can go to our website. It is jodiandwill.square.site is the URL for our main site. At the very top, you can actually go to a scheduling link and schedule it by appointment, or you can just buy the appointment and we'll schedule it for you, however you want to do it. As we've said previously, we do a lot of energy work, like Reiki work. We've done etheric attachment work. We've done
chakra balancing.
We've done all kinds of stuff. And of course, some of these we would consider to be basic services. We then have some of our mid-tier services, which are more like people that need more in-depth work. And then, of course, then we have the premium tier stuff, which is more like the SSP information access stuff, because it requires time and energy to do all that. Mm-hmm. I literally have to channel a bunch of stuff before I even get into that session. So, but yeah, it's a lot of work. And the thing is that that's where people, if they're trying to figure out how to work on that portion themselves, if it's there, then we can help them access that and do that.
And I also do shamanic journeys. And oftentimes what shows up for people who have questions is my guides. They will give me certain information that sometimes will seem metaphorical, sometimes it will seem literal. But what happens is if the client who will interpret all that information, I'm just the messenger, the way they interpret that information, sometimes it'll be like, oh, I get it. Okay. But maybe it'll come and they'll have an aha moment in a week, 2 weeks, a month, 6 months down the road. But it's like it unfolds for them, and they have those answers.
The same thing happens in our coaching sessions. We do coaching sessions as well, and the same thing happens there. I'll have clients who initially, as they're taking notes and they're recording stuff, they may not get it that day, but we'll have these moments where we get an email 3 or 4 days later, and they're like, holy crap, you said such and such, and I just lost my mind.
Yeah. Or the next day, this person I ran into said this to me, or, oh, I just got this book and I don't know how it just literally almost fell off the shelf, so it's just everything that they were supposed to tie into what we had told them did. It was just this beautiful unfolding. And we've had the most amazing emails back from our clients, and we have clients around the world, and it's just beautiful. Yeah. It's really amazing. So it's Services with Jodi and Will. And we also have a Facebook page, Instagram as well. Yeah.
Yep. And like I said, if you go to our Facebook page, we have the link to our actual Square site in there as well.
Mm-hmm. So you essentially, the premium tier, whatever you call it, you assist with memory retrieval in a way. So okay, that's good to know. Because I know there's people out there looking.
And by the time we see you guys May next year, we'll probably should already have our level 2 QHHT stuff already done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's nice. That's the knock on wood plan.
Yeah.
We're in the middle of working on that. But that is a goal that we do want, because we recognize that some folks may not be comfortable with the SIA portion, the SSP information access. Maybe they want to pull it from themselves to verify it. And that's another way you can confirm what's being told to you is you have the stuff that's being shown to you by my alters, and then you do the QHHT, and it comes from inside of you verifying what you've actually seen, or vice versa, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One thing I do want to say, because this kind of has come up a few times from our clients. So if you want to get services with us, make sure, and if you want to record, make sure that you bring some type of recording device, because we are sticklers on confidentiality, right, especially when it comes to information access with the programs. So if you request, hey, push that record on the Zoom, we'll do it for you. But we don't just automatically assume we're just going to record the session for you. Sometimes maybe people they want strict confidentiality, so they're just going to take notes, or maybe they're just going to, record it on their phones because maybe they don't want us to have a copy of that, right, in our archives. So we want to respect that for them. Because we have had a couple emails where people are like, did you, are we going to get that recording? And we're like, well, in our initial email, we did say to bring a recording device. Yep. But if you do want us to record, then hey, we'll hit the record button on the Zoom. So just want to bring that up.
Yes.
No, that's cool. I mean, I give the people the option. I respect that. That's cool. Because this is personal stuff, and for some people it's everything. It's not something that, we might be going through, or an individual might be going through something that no one around them knows, not even their family or anything. So it's a big deal to them. Hopefully we all get to the point where we're just ready to be open, because once you're open and you start speaking your truth, your whole life changes, because everything that doesn't belong falls away, and you start attracting everything that does belong, including the people, and it'll actually help you on your healing journey, and you're not fighting anymore. So yeah. Any last things you guys would like to share before we start wrapping this up?
First off and foremost, I would say if you have the inkling that you're in the programs, start doing the research. That's the first thing I would say. Secondly, journal. Journal your dreams, your screen memories, everything, journaling. Because what you'll notice, even in a screen memory, you'll see certain repetition patterns in the dream that may show that it's actually the screen memory or not. So journaling that stuff is very important. As my wife will tell you, I write everything either down on my phone, or I write it down in a notepad that I have, usually by the bed, because I am just fastidious about doing that anymore, because as stuff comes back to me, I don't keep it locked in my brain for very long, because I don't want to latch onto that energy from that memory. And this is why I'm telling people, if you can, just write it down. That way later on, sometime down the line, you can review it and say, well, what was that? Right?
He's so good at that.
Date it,
Nice.
Time it, whatever you need to do, but make sure you record it. Very important.
And it seems like if you write it down, you're almost getting it out of your head and making space for new stuff to come forward to heal, or new memories that you might not even have to heal from, but you're creating space for new opportunities, basically.
Yeah.
And when you said, like, if you had an inkling you're in the programs and start doing research, well, what exactly do you mean? Because where do you go? What do you actually research if you don't actually know?
Well, like in my case, right? So the first person that I hit, and again, I'm not endorsing this person at all. I'm just saying that this is what for me triggered it off, was Dave Wilcock and Corey Good, right? We talked about them earlier. Dave and Corey put out Cosmic Disclosure. That was the big one for me, because I actually have seen Corey in the programs. I know that he's real deal.
Yeah.
Secondly, I would say the second thing for me that keyed it off was when I started seeing certain correlations. Now, again, I have issues around the way they do the TV show, which is Ancient Aliens, but there are premises in there that definitely, if you were to extrapolate those and look at under the guise of an ET species / SSP background, a lot of stuff makes complete sense, because you're seeing some of these individuals timeline jumping and going back and restarting and rebuilding stuff, further back in the timeline. And Peter and I have chatted about this off and on too, where some of the dates they use on the ACI website, which for those people who want to get kind of an idea, by the way, you can go to acio-agency.org. And that's Peter's website. And basically he breaks down a lot of these big groups, these big corporations. Understand the dates in there. This is where Peter and I have our difference of opinion, right? So Peter says that they were started at that timeline. I keep telling him, well, you're forgetting the part where they used looking glass to jump back to that portion of the timeline and take all these technicians and money and whatever with them. So this is where, again, if people knew the full scope of what they were looking at, they would be utterly shocked and amazed. and not in a good way, by the way. There is a horror portion of this too, the cost of human lives and the slavery aspect and all this other stuff that comes up with it, right? And lastly, I would say if you're trying to do research today, also, I would say you can check out Gaia TV, great place to look. You can look at Super Soldier Talk, which is James Rink's channel. You can go look at Ted Alexander's videos, what used to be Quantum Red Pill Cafe, the videos I did with him.
You can go to my show.
Yeah.
I've actually, interviewed super soldiers on Guided.
Project Camelot would be another
Yep.
good resource. Carrie Cassidy and some people on there, definitely.
So by research, you just mean like start looking into this stuff, listening to these shows, listen to Journey to the Truth podcast or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah.
I would also, use spirit and your guides to actually kind of say, okay, go look here, go look here. I mean, I would spend endless nights, like sometimes doing all-nighters, because spirit would say, okay, go to this website. And it would then lead me to another website. Then it would lead me to another website. And I was like literally going to people, like I'll give you a quick example. I started researching mind control and these government projects and all these sub-projects. Well, I came across a man named Dr. Ross 80. Okay. He was one of the top guys who helped the CIA with mind control and basically programming assets through EMF waves. Okay. So spirit told me, look into him. I wanted to interview him for my show, found out he had passed in like 2013. I'm like, dang it. Spirit goes, he has a son. I look and lo and behold, he had a son. Well, at the time I was living in the East Bay of San Francisco and that son happened to live not even a mile from my house. And it was just crazy. I ended up calling him. Wow. We start talking and I said, I know that you worked in your dad's lab with, his research. I would love to interview. He's like, that's top secret. I can't tell you anything about that. Well, right then I knew this stuff was true, And so it's just like your guides and you using that discernment will know like where to go. And so the internet, books, people, Dolores Cannon, you name it. I was just like this sponge and you'll get to the right things that will confirm it for you. And your spirit will be like, no, I'm going to throw that out. No, yeah, that rings true to me. Something
else I'll say too, and this is more so for the people who are on social media primarily. I am completely for joining groups of people who have a common goal of working through their issues and talking about their issues and trying to find some level of healing, right? What we typically see, though, especially on Facebook, are these groups of people that essentially all they do is they rehash their trauma and then they wonder why they feel crappier after rehashing their trauma, right?
Yeah.
There's no effort put into trying to heal that trauma at all.
Take note of how you feel before and after.
Yeah.
You do anything like that,
And again, I'm not trying to bash any particular person or group. I'm not. What I am trying to say is that we as spiritually aware beings have to be more cognizant of where we put our energy. And that's why you've noticed, like for me, for example, I don't involve myself in certain groups or certain social media sites because it just does not serve my energy in order to do that. So again, people want to connect with us on Facebook. You can look at our services with Jodi and Will page. You can go to our website and get services to us there. But typically, like for example, with your guys' event is coming up in May of next year, right? We're doing that event because we feel earnestly that this shift needs to be put out into the mainstream. It needs to be, kind of kicked in the ass through the door to get out in the mainstream.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to give that kind of nudge or kick to kind of shove it out through the door so people in the mainstream can see it.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And that's kind of the whole idea, the concept of the conference is I didn't want to just, it's strategically put together to, like I said, build a case for this stuff. And I'm hoping that locals and people come and new people are drawn to this. And, even though they've heard all the speakers talk before, there's going to be new information. and there's energy exchanges. You meet people there. It creates a ripple effect every time there's a conference. And the reason I even got into this stuff was because of my interest in the secret space program. So I know there's something there. Obviously, it resonates deeply, and it's a passion. So if we can keep that going and keep that information going and make it relevant and make it mainstream, the more we do this, the better. You know.
By the time I came out in 2017, 2018, when I started talking about this more publicly, there were already about 50 people out who had been talking about this in the mainstream, most of them completely unknown, unless you were really into ufology and studying all this stuff, right? But what happened is that as people like, James, myself, Ted, and others have started to kind of put these pieces together, what we're noticing is there is a repetition in the story. And the repetition is that we humans have had a consistent and constant interfacing with these ET species. It's happened for decades, maybe even longer than that, maybe millennia. And what we need to do is wake up to the fact that things are not all exactly what they seem. There's a definite portrayed image being put out there to keep the masses calm. And then you have the reality. And what we're talking about with these programs is a reality.
Or subdued, right?
Well, again, I'm not trying. Okay, so I have to be very careful about imagery and how we talk about these programs too, because if I was to talk about it the way she and I have talked about it in terms of what we remember, like the wall aspect of it, I could traumatize people just by talking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's that visceral for us.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not what this is about. This is about us giving an accurate depiction, A, of what happened, and B, how do we show people, yes, there is a light at the end of the tunnel that you can move toward and gain some level of healing once you get to that light.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I just want to add, with my research, I know these things are true. I have interfaced with skeptics of all sorts.
Oh, yeah.
And the thing is, I am coming from a news background. I mean, my background is as an anchor reporter. I've worked at NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox. And now if I shared this, on those sources, those news sources, I probably, and I actually have said goodbye to those sources because they would be like, you're crazy. But the thing is I feel so passionately about this and know that these programs exist that I would expose them in a heartbeat. I've even pitched them to news directors. And one of them said, sure, we'll do stories like that. You can kind of be the paranormal correspondent. Well, I got hired in Oregon and he put the kibosh on that. And I was just like, what? Are you kidding me? So I was like really upset that he did that. But of course, I felt like I was like, I felt like he gaslighted me just to get me on, But the thing is that
so the guy is literally going to turn you into the George Knapp of Oregon, right?
Right. I don't know. But it's just, the thing is that I'm seeing is that the more you give yourself permission and others permission to be on board with disclosure, share their truth, it actually is coming out in the mainstream. I mean, you hear stuff on Fox, you hear stuff on pretty much all of the mainstream networks about UFOs, about exactly UAPs.
Big right now.
Right. So there is soft disclosure coming out, even with that huge report that came out. Sure, they're not sharing everything, but it's a start.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say this too, by the way, just as a side note to this. We were talking earlier about this idea of people looking at the media, people looking at other sources to try to find information about this stuff. Again, if you're journaling this stuff and you're writing this stuff down, find out what jives with you first, right? Because again, we talk about this idea of confirmation, right? Self-confirmation is one thing, but when you have an outside source that says, oh yeah, by the way, what you actually saw was what you saw, and it's the truth, that's a whole other bailiwick. So that's why I keep telling people, it's one thing to say, this is my story and it's true. It's another thing to have an outside source saying that, right? A confirmed outside source, someone who has no skin in the game, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where having people who can help you through that process can kind of walk you through this. And Jodi and I were doing the walk. So that's why we're doing this. That's why we have a business centered around this, because our idea is that no one's really helping this community at all. Everyone's looking at these people in this community as being outcasts and they're crazy and the tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists. Tony Rodriguez, a friend of mine, he said it the best. He said, okay, if they're tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists, just give them a month and they'll be normal people after that. They'll be in the mainstream news and they'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly the truth. That's the rate at which we're going at right now. So
it pretty much is.
But that's why we're doing what we do, is because we know that at some point when this stuff comes out in the mainstream, there will be people who will be like, about freaking time, and they want help.
And that's why we appreciate you guys so much too, is, getting this out here and, across the airwaves. And it's awesome.
Yeah. It doesn't come without a price. The amount of ridicule we've been getting lately, we push the boundaries with information a lot of times. And we don't challenge. If somebody comes on the show and they're sharing something, sometimes we don't challenge that. We give them a stage. If we let them share their experience, because who are we to say it's true or not? Everybody who's listening can feel into that themselves. But what they try and do is tie us to that information, and they think like, there's no way. If you think about it, like, people get angry, but there's no way that we could share the same beliefs with every single guest we've ever had.
Right.
Now we try to have on people that we know generally their information, we agree with it, and we're trying to get, but that doesn't mean every single thing they believe and say it's going to be line up with our own, and that because we have them on the show, every single thing they say we're promoting, which a lot of people just assume, and that's where we have to make a disclaimer there.
Exactly. And that's what I'm trying to do.
But generally, yeah, we generally do. Yeah. If there's too big of a thing that somebody is pushing or believes, then we try to stay, we don't want that getting out there. But if it's more minor stuff, then
yeah,
but then, yeah, you get a lot of people like, I can't believe you're having this guy and he's saying this. And, everyone has their own flags of truth that if you say something against that, we get the flat earthers attack us, we get all kinds of stuff like that all the time.
Yeah, and what it is it's also, I think some people their belief systems are being threatened when they hear this information, and sometimes, or it doesn't fit a narrative that 8 other people are pushing. They're all these other people they follow are pushing this narrative, and then this other guy comes out of left field with this information that contradicts it.
That's what happened with me. That's what happened with me when I first came out with James's show. When I first came out with my testimony, you guys probably remember watching the videos, I'm sure. I came out, I talked about my testimony. I said, this is what I believe. This is what I've been through. Over time, I've released more information because I felt that the ground was fertile enough, metaphorically speaking, to plant those seeds of information so people could kind of do their own research and say whether or not I'm crazy or not. And over time, people have said, you know what, there's all these other people that have said the exact same thing you said, maybe a little differently, but it is the exact same thing, generically speaking. So this is where, again, you have outside confirmation showing what you're saying is the truth, and it's repeated over and over and over again.
Yeah.
That's, again, a whole other bailiwick. And we get those too. Jodi and I, we've had some individuals who we could name by name who they love to email us and call us and be like, you guys are such frauds, you're blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Really, this is how you spend your evenings,
Yeah, exactly.
The big thing now is people think that we're compromised because we still have a YouTube channel. There's no way we're telling the truth if we still have a channel, because they would have taken us down. We're counting our blessings. We don't know why we haven't been taken down. Thank God.
We've had Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Linktree, Spotify all deleted. So we've had stuff taken down, just not YouTube.
I think the thing is that if you allow things to polarize you anything can polarize people. I mean, anything can polarize society, humanity, if we allow it. I mean, I think other people's fears can actually polarize. I mean, in families, in relationships, in humanity. And that's the thing. I love the fact that you guys allow diversity of thought, because if you think about it, I mean, to your point, yes, people have discernment, so they can say, okay, that resonates with me. Nope, that doesn't. But if you think about it, okay, say there's even these flat earthers that you may or may not agree with. Somebody who disagrees with that theory actually could even strengthen their own theory, even though they believe something different. So you never know the nuances that you can take away from even somebody you disagree with, because I just feel like every story is unique. Every belief could be, taken in a way that strengthens you if you allow it. If you allow your heart to be open and not just be like, oh, forget them, I'm closing them out of, just everything.
It said this one thing I don't agree with, so I'm just going to shut out. Yeah.
Right. Baby out with the bathwater type thing. Yeah.
Exactly.
And it comes down to with like, we have to remain open-minded too. This is, our name is perfect. Journey to Truth. It's not the truth as we see it. If we, if we were just putting out like one narrative that we knew like our fans like agreed with, what's the point?
Yeah, that's such a good point, Tyler.
We're on the journey as well. That's what people like. It's not saying we have it all figured out.
Exactly.
We're on this journey.
Yeah. Aaron and Tyler, I love that. I think that's beautiful. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. So with that, guys, come to our conference, buy a ticket, come hang out with us next May. It's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait. Tickets are now available. The link is below. We'll have Johan and Jodi's links below as well. And also we'll put Peter the Insider's website below if people want to check that out. Yep. Anything we can provide for you guys to further your research. Find them on Facebook, on Instagram, book a session with them. We'll have those links all below. Don't forget, if you're looking for some new CBD to try, you get 10% off with promo code Journey to Truth 10, Hopewell Farm. It's some really great stuff, has just about as much THC as legally possible, but it's really great stuff. I found that it's saving my dog. My dog has seizures now, and thank God I had some of that stuff around because it works great for that. Maya? It stops Maya, Maya. Yeah, it stops the seizures on the spot. It's incredible. I mean, any CBD will do that, but it's just great stuff to have around. And then what else? Oh, Teespring merchandise, 15% off all of our Teespring merch. Promo code CGI Joe. And we do have a new T-shirt on there, which is he's wearing the William Tompkins T-shirt. Yep. But we have a T-shirt to go with our conference that's on there now also. So that's available, and that T-shirt is available through our website, secretspaceconference.info. And you can get that there. You can get a ticket there. I think I've said everything I need to say. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Telegram. If you guys want to catch us on social media, we're also on Rumble, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, or Stitcher, Foxhole, BitChute. There's a whole list of them. So if you're not following us, or if something happens to this channel, you know where else you can follow us. That being said, thank you guys so much. Again, this was a lot of fun. We covered everything. I feel like we could talk for 2 more hours, but amazing. It was really great.
Thank you.
I think with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Good night, everybody. Thank you all for the donations. Thank you for supporting us through everything we're doing. We really appreciate it and can't say it enough. So have a great evening, and we will see you next time. Good night.